Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the DFO DFS report for Friday, March the 11th. Almost had February the 11th. March the 11th. Um, Apologies right off the bat. Didn't get to do this show a couple days there, Tuesday, Thursday this week. Those busy slates are just a little too much for me to do everything that I need to do and get live. Yesterday, 13 games was just absolute madness all day long. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, there was just no chance. But again, also, I try my best to come live every day. Next year, I got big plans to make sure that this is a 5 to 7 day a week show to make sure that we can do this every day. But for the meantime, it's kind of just touch and go depending on how many games there are. But 4 games tonight. It's Friday. I got to be out of here by 5:30 because I got reservations at a new Mexican restaurant in the area, which I heard rumor on the street is that it's fantastic. So I cannot wait to indulge in all the Corona and margaritas and tacos that they have to offer. So let's get right into it so we can enjoy our Friday nights. 4-game slate starts at 7 p.m. We got Tristan Jarry for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Unclear who starts for the Vegas Golden Knights. We know it will not be Robin Lehner. He's back in Vegas nursing a lower body injury. Laurent Brossoit started yesterday. I have, if it was like my gut feeling is that it'll be Brossoit again. It could be Logan Thompson, but to me, if they were planning on starting Thompson, you would have imagined that he would have got the easier game yesterday. So I imagine it'll be Brossoit, especially just given kind of their current state with the team, still battling for the playoffs and coming off a tough loss yesterday. So I think it's going to be Brossoit, but again, that might get announced while I'm live here. I'm also trying to keep an eye on the Twitter machine to see if there's any last minute updates. Speaking of which, Matt Barzal is a game time decision. So that's going to basically change everything. If he ends up playing, it's going to change everything we talk about on today's show. So I guess we'll just continue to plug away here for the next 20 minutes and hopefully Matt Barzal doesn't ruin our night. Elvis Merzlikins expected to go for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Capo Kakkonen was confirmed about 5 minutes ago. Most likely going to see Semyon Varlamov, but again, unconfirmed for the Islanders. They went with Sorokin yesterday, so I'd imagine it'd be Varlamov. They stick to a pretty strict goaltending rotation. Connor Hellebuck starts for the Jets. In the nightcap, you've got the Canucks and the Capitals. It'll be Thatcher Demko against Vitek Vanacek. In terms of the implied totals for tonight's slate, The Minnesota Wild are our biggest favorite tonight against the Blue Jackets, a 4.0 implied goals for there. Their offense has been absolutely on fire. Crushed the Red Wings yesterday. Well, they crushed them, but won it over in a shootout. Still scored 4 goals. They've been, red hot in terms of putting the puck in the back of the net. Keeping it out of their own net has been the issue as of late. The Pittsburgh Penguins, big favorites against the short-handed Vegas Golden Knights. I believe, including Robin Lehner, they will be down 7 regulars tonight, including Riley Smith. Many other guys. There's so many, too many to remember. Riley Smith's the latest to go down with an injury. The Islanders and Jets in a close one, and then the Capitals and Canucks in nearly a coin flip matchup there. In terms of the 5v5 scores for tonight, this is not correct. Let's update that. Minnesota 1 at the very top, Pittsburgh 1, Winnipeg 2, Islanders 1, which is currently Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, Anthony Beauvillier. They were outstanding yesterday. If I would have done a show, I would have told you to play them because I played a bunch of them. Anderson, first career hat trick. Nelson and Beauvillier, decent nights as well. Given how well they played yesterday, I would imagine that this line will still be together tonight, even if Barzal plays. I think Barzal will most likely slide in between Bailey and Palmieri. Is my guess. So it'd be Bailey, Barzal, Palmieri, and then it'll be Pajot at center with Parise and Oliver Wahlstrom, most likely. That's how I would imagine it'll end up being, given how good Lee, Nelson, and Beauvillier played yesterday. So I'm still going to play New York Islanders 1 the way it currently is. Obviously, we'll have to pivot in warmups if anything changes, but that's kind of how I feel things will go tonight. But let's just get right into it. That's the big board. We'll start up top with that Minnesota Wild, Columbus Blue Jackets game. The top 2 lines for the Wild grayed out spectacularly. The second line was fantastic again last night. They were significantly cheaper. I absolutely love both of these lines tonight. I especially love Minnesota 2, just given how cheap they are. The Blue Jackets, they've been giving up goals at will as well. So this could be another very high scoring game. I would imagine that the Minnesota Wild offense will have no issue tonight. It's a matter of whether or not the Blue Jackets can get on the board. Given how many goals the Wild have been giving up, you'd imagine that that's probably pretty likely. But I obviously favor the Wild side of things more so than the Blue Jackets. But it's going to be difficult here for me to kind of break this one down because I wouldn't be surprised after being. Did they end up getting shut out last night? I know it was like 6-0. I think they finished 6-0. So after being shut out last night, I would imagine the Blue Jackets will probably shuffle things, shuffle the deck a little bit, which is going to change things here, obviously. So one switch I wouldn't be surprised to see is Nyquist off this top line, maybe putting Bjorkstrand or Voracek back up there with Jenner and Laine. They had a lot of success with that in the past, so I wouldn't be surprised if they make that move tonight. I would imagine this deck will be shuffled a little bit for the Blue Jackets, but we won't know for sure until warmups, and makes that a little bit difficult to break down. But from a matchup standpoint, that Boone Jenner line is going to be going head to head with the Kaprizov line, regardless of who he has on his wings. It's a really good matchup right now. If the lines hold as they currently are, it's the best matchup on the entire slate for a very, very good line. The Sean Crowley line expected to go head to head with the Matt Boldy line most of the evening as well. That line has not been all that great defensively this season. They match up against the opposition's top 6 quite a bit, and they get caved in quite a bit. So yeah, really good matchups for both the top lines of the Wild. They've, like I've said, on the show, many, many times, they're nearly mirror images of each other right now in terms of, from an analytics perspective, almost the exact same expected goals for, near the same amount of scoring chances, near the same amount of high dangers. They're basically 2 top lines right now playing very, very well, both with very good matchups. So I always lean Minnesota 2 just because they're a little bit cheaper. They're nearly identical, but obviously, you've got that full power play, a little bit more power play exposure here with that top line, full power play correlation between Hartman, Zuccarello, and Kaprizov, obviously ups their upside a little bit, but Minnesota 2 is shown to be just as effective. So if I had to pick, if you're only building one line, I'd prefer to, focus on Minnesota 2, just because I think that you could, you can pair them with another really good line, where if you're playing Minnesota 1, you kind of have to, play a maybe shittier line. And if they both have success, then you're obviously going to be happy with Minnesota 2 and that salary relief that you get there. But obviously Minnesota 1, they grade out the best. They are certainly one of the highest upside lines on the slate. From the Columbus perspective, matchup-wise, these numbers aren't going to change. The matchups are going to be the matchups. They're not very good across the board. Even though the Wild have been giving up plenty of goals. A lot of that has to do with the fact that their goaltending hasn't been all that great overall. If you take a look at these lines, they're not too bad defensively at all. So I would imagine that, if Kakinen can play well tonight, it'll be another pretty big win for the Wild, a fairly low scoring night for the Blue Jackets. And it's just difficult for me to recommend who I would play given how I don't know what their lines are going to look like. I think that the only line that you can really trust from the Blue Jackets is this top line with Jenner, Line and whoever the hell else ends up being on this wing. They are very expensive. So to me, they're not really a priority for me tonight. I like Pittsburgh. I like Vegas. I like the Islanders. I like the Jets. I like basically everybody else on this slate more than the Blue Jackets. And given the fact that I don't know who is going to be, playing with who, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Minnesota 3 is going to wreck this slate. Certainly a possibility. Again, if you take a look at the matchups, they actually have the worst matchup of the group. So if that happens, I'd be pretty surprised. But they're the type of line that can definitely do that. Their offense is pretty solid. They're very, very good defensively. They're just a very good line. They're very, very cheap. And if they have a night, then they can certainly be slate killers, 9,900 to full stack. They could be an interesting line to maybe pair with one of the more expensive lines, whether it be Pittsburgh 1 or somebody else. So yeah, I think Minnesota 3 is okay as well. You still got Erickson on that top power play unit. The other two don't have, a crazy amount of upside, but there's certainly guys that are capable of having, a big night, from time to time. And I think that they're an okay value option if you want to pair them with somebody like Pittsburgh 1 and still play like a Chris Letang or something like that. In terms of the power play report here, brutal power plays both sides. The Wild power play hasn't been all that good. The Blue Jackets, penalty kills actually fairly solid. The Blue Jackets power play is a nightmare. So overall, it's the two worst power play advantages overall. But I think there's enough to like there from the Minnesota Wild at 5v5. Second game, you've got the Penguins and the Golden Knights. So this is a weird one because I really thought the Golden Knights were going to have a good night last night. I mean, it's Jack Eichel's return to Buffalo. I thought he was going to have a great night. Then in warmups, we find out it's going to be Pacioretty, Jack Eichel, and Marchessault. And I'm like, holy shit, let's get all the Marchessault we can get because no one's going to really be playing him, which ended up being the case. I think he was 10% owned. The other two were 20% owned. And they didn't do anything. And it was pretty disappointing. I had some really good lineups that had Jack Eichel in it, and he did nothing. So I think this is such a big game for them. I do actually expect a bit of a bounce back here from them, at least from this top line. The rest of this team is so decimated right now. You've got Michael Amadio playing in your top six. You got Will Carrier, who actually looked really good yesterday playing on your third line. It's just a real ugly lineup right now. So that top line, if it sticks with Pacioretty, Eichel, and Marchessault, I do really like them still tonight. It's projected to be the highest event game of the night, which bodes well for them. The problem is the matchup's not good. They're going to see quite a bit of Crosby and then kind of a mix of the rest. There's no real hard matching going on in this game, but the Penguins are very solid defensively, as you can see here. Bad matchups across the board for the Golden Knights. I really wouldn't consider playing anybody else other than this top line from Vegas. I think because they probably, like I said, they were 20% owned yesterday. They burned a lot of people. The matchup's much more difficult tonight. I think that they'll actually be a pretty reasonable owned percentage tonight. So I'm okay with going back to them because they need to perform tonight. They need to win as many games as they can here. And this is a big game. So, if they end up being, decently low owned, then I think that they're a really nice contrarian option. I don't think they're going to be super contrarian by any stretch, but I think that, I wouldn't be surprised if they come in around 10% because there's some, I think Pittsburgh's going to be pretty popular. I think, you still got Ovechkin on the slate. You've got Minnesota, who's going to be super popular. I was going to say wildly popular. I missed the boat there, but, overall, they've been pretty good. Pacioretty and Eichel, again, shitty night last night, but 35 scoring chances, 4 per 60, 14 high danger. Adding Marchessault should only help. Hopefully, they keep that trio together. So if they're fairly low owned, then I'm definitely very interested in them. On the flip side, the matchups are pretty solid here. Like I said, for the Penguins, it's a pretty high event matchup. Both the top six here for the Penguins looks pretty solid. For the second line for the Penguins, it's going to be Danton, Heinen, Malkin, and Rodriguez. They're very, very cheap, 12,400. You compare them very easily with Minnesota 1. I'm not super excited about what kind of upside they offer, but obviously we've seen big games out of Evan Rodriguez, and maybe moving back up with Malkin will help spark that him a little bit again here. So they're really cheap. I think that they're I'm not super excited about Danton, Heinen, but on a 4-game slate, you could probably do worse than Pittsburgh 2 tonight. Obviously, Pittsburgh 1, the most expensive line on the slate. Tons of upside. They're actually fairly cheap, all things considered. I mean, Crosby's the most expensive at 7,500, so they're still pretty easy to play. You can still pair them with some pretty good lines. You can easily still play them with Minnesota 2, Winnipeg 2. You can still do stuff like that. So Obviously, they have the higher upside. They fully correlate in the top power play unit. Speaking of the top power play unit, that's the fourth best advantage on the slate. Their power play is very good. The Golden Knights' penalty kills also very good, but again, they're missing some key pieces right now. It is a back-to-back, so I'm not too worried about the Penguins having success tonight. The top line, definitely the higher upside. Pittsburgh 2 looks like a decent value option as well if you need some salary relief, whether you're playing Minnesota 1 or something like that. Pittsburgh 2 is okay, but I'm much more interested and focused on Pittsburgh 1 in this matchup. The numbers across the board are very, very good. Although Pittsburgh 2's numbers are pretty solid as well. So, as I mentioned, pretty decent value option tonight. Howdy, how about Nedeljkovic, Gordie Howe hat trick, Leah Hextall, color commentary. Oh no, how can this be? How can this be? Yeah, that was pretty wild yesterday. But Eichel isn't healthy. I don't know if I don't think Eichel's not healthy. Like, I don't think they rushed him back by any stretch, but I still think he's just getting back into things here. Crosby will eat Eichel, I'm afraid. And I think that's what a lot of people are worried about, right? I think a lot of people aren't going to play Vegas tonight, which makes them in a nice spot here. Max Pacioretty, there isn't any word whether or not he's going to play tonight at this moment. He was banged up yesterday. Didn't look great. He's been pretty much banged up all season long as well. Keep an eye on whether or not he plays as well. Obviously, if he doesn't play, that's going to change things clearly. But as of right now, there's no news about Max Pacioretty playing or not playing. The only new news we have, as I mentioned, Matt Barzal, a game time decision. But since I've come live, nothing about Pacioretty or any of the Golden Knights. Third game of the night. But you guys are kind of just reinforced my point, right? Like, you guys don't sound very interested in playing Vegas tonight. And I think that offers a pretty decent opportunity because we know what kind of upside those guys can have. So their own percentage, if the chat here is any indication, should be relatively low tonight, which makes me fairly interested. Overall, I mean, they still graded out as the number 5 line overall on the slate, which is good enough for me. Winnipeg and the Islanders. This is an interesting one as well. Hellebuck has been basically giving up at least 4 goals per game for like as long as I can remember. Apparently, he's the number 2 goalie behind Eric Comrie, who was amazing again last night. That guy is costing me a ton of money in the books right now because he just keeps crushing me. But Winnipeg 2, Islanders 1, both look like the kind of the class of the field in this one. Winnipeg 2 continues to be really, really strong. This is the second most high event matchup on the slate. Overall, though, Winnipeg 2 has what is deemed to be the worst matchup on the entire slate. They're expected to see the majority of their ice time against the Islanders top line, which I just mentioned has been very, very good, like really, really good. 37 scoring chances for, 16 high danger. They've been great. Hopefully Barzal slots in here. And then they're also going to see a lot of the Tzidki's line, which has been really good defensively as well. So matchup-wise, it's not very good. But when you're looking at the Jets, it's like, who else are you really going to play? Obviously, the Scheifele-Wheeler connection has been pretty solid from time to time, but fairly inconsistent. The one thing I will say about Wheeler and Scheifele is they're still really, really cheap. $5,900 for Scheifele and $5,000 for Wheeler. The matchup is a little bit better, but not great. So to me, I still like Winnipeg too. We also saw, and what interests me a lot is that we also saw a sprinkle of Nick Ehlers with Dubois and Connor yesterday. It didn't last very long, but if they end up going to that for an extended run, I love that, right? I mean, what's not to like about that? So I'm pretty interested tonight on a 4-game slate. You got to try to get different some ways. I'm pretty interested in playing Connor, Dubois, and Ehlers together and just hoping that ends up happening, right? Ehlers is plenty capable of getting the job done on the third line as well. He's been solid. He's super cheap at $4,800. So I like playing Connor, Dubois, and Ehlers together and just hoping that maybe in warm-ups or whatever it changes and people don't have enough time to adjust or they change it mid-game and those 3 have success together. And as I mentioned, he can have enough success by himself. I just don't like Svechnikov's been fine on kind of like a game-to-game basis, but overall the consistency just isn't there. At 2,600, he's worth a dart throw, but on a 4-game slate, you got to try to get weird or a little bit different. And I think putting Ehlers with that, fine, all in on Eichel. Okay, I didn't say all in on Eichel, but I just think it's a decent spot here. Nelson Leah have been absurdly great as of late. Yes. Isles 1 advanced stats are stupid funny. High event line, everyone gets chances. They've been so good. So in terms of their matchup, they're going to go, as I mentioned, they're going to kind of just see a sprinkle of everybody. They're going to see a decent amount of that Eichel line as well. That Scheifele line. That Scheifele line's been really bad defensively. Pretty much everybody except for the Lowry line's been bad defensively for the Jets. So there's not really one line other than that Lowry line that you're not going to have chances against. I love Islanders 1. Again, just keep an eye on what the lines look like, but they're the one line that I'd be honing in on tonight. I don't know if I want to play the Barzell line, even if he's back in the lineup tonight, but, you know, it could be okay. It just depends who he plays with, I guess. I would imagine Bailey and Palmieri, they're stupid cheap, so they'd be, they'd get a big boost by playing with Barzell. So they might be a decent pivot option because I would imagine they're not going to be, even close to, 5% owned if, as a whole, if Barzell plays, right? People aren't going to really be anticipating Barzell playing or figuring out where he's playing. And, still a game time decision. So people will be worried about plugging them in. Whenever those game time decisions play, they're usually pretty low owned. So that might be a decent contrarian spot there. Playing that line, they're super cheap. You can play them with Pittsburgh 1. You can play them with Minnesota 1 if Barzell plays. But just again, keep an eye on Daily Face Off Twitter during warmups. But most of my interest is going to be Connor Dubois, Ehlers, and then obviously Lee Nelson and Beauvillier. I played them last night. They were great. They look great again tonight. The matchup is solid, 71 in the matchup score. And then obviously the 37 scoring chance of 16 high danger is outstanding. The 60% expected goals for share. So they've been great. No reason to not play them at 11,000 to full stack. But then again, this Barzell line, I would imagine that this matchup will change, right? It'll probably be similar to this. This will be the matchup that they'll see. Pajot will go up against the top line. So the Pajot line will always have the better matchup because you'll see a lot of Scheifele, but still a half decent matchup for this Barzell line. As like a $9,000 line or whatever they're going to be. Are the Isles starting Varlamov? It is unclear, most likely, but again, we won't know until warmups. It's the Isles, though. I can't trust them. Yeah, trusting the Isles is certainly a difficult thing to do, especially because they don't play the most high-event game. Also because they like to play their fourth line more than like anybody in the world. So even when their top line's playing great, they don't see a ton of ice time. So it's definitely difficult to trust the Islanders, but the Jets have been giving up a ton of goals, specifically Hellebuck. Matchup-wise, it looks good. I like going back to the Isles. And as I mentioned before, right? Like if they stay hot and then this line gets up to like 17,000, I'm not going to play them. But 11,700, there's no risk. There's no risk here. And then you take a look at the power play score. They have the number one power play advantage on the slate. They have the second best power play overall going up against a Jets penalty kill that's not been very good. Noah Dobson's been an absolute animal on the back end. So pairing New York Islanders 1 with Noah Dobson, they fully correlate in the top power play unit. Playing with house money here tonight at 11,700 plus Dobson's only like 5,700. Easy money for me. I like the Isles. The Jets, fifth best advantage. They have a pretty good power play, third best overall on the slate, but the Islanders penalty kill is among the best on the slate as well. So I still like the Jets. As I mentioned, that second line is really the one that I'm looking at tonight, as opposed to the Scheifele line. But that Scheifele line's crushed me in the past. So, if you were planning on playing the Scheifele line, then go for it because they are still super cheap. This next game looks like the lowest event matchup on the slate. I don't particularly love it. I never really play the Capitals except for when they were in Edmonton. I'll probably do the same thing tonight with this second line. They're just still too cheap. Mantha 3,400, Backstrom 4,200, Oshie 4,300. They were great for us the other night. Oshie looks great in that power play unit. Backstrom's playing well. This line looks solid. So again, they don't grade out very well because their overall offensive numbers aren't great. As of right now, 21 scoring chances, like they're pretty brutal, but they're very good defensively as well. So, overall, they're a pretty good line. They just don't generate a ton offensively, but the power play usage, the fact that Mantha can score pretty much, whenever he's got the puck on his stick, at their price point, they're just too cheap to not play. I would rather play them over Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, and Connor Sheary. So, I'm not in love with this game, really. I like Demko quite a bit tonight, but if I was going to play Washington, it would be that second line just for the value. You can easily, as I mentioned, pair them with the Crosby line or Minnesota's top line. So a lot to like there from that price standpoint. And I would imagine, given the game that they just had, they'll see a decent amount of ownership. So if you are planning on playing them with like Crosby, know that, it's probably going to be a decently popular build, but I still don't expect this line to see a crazy amount of ownership, just given the state of this game probably being on the lower scoring side of things. The Canucks are playing very well. This top line is very, very good. 36 scoring chances, 13 high danger. They've been very solid all season. So I like them. I don't really love playing Tanner Pearson. The matchup isn't very good either. They're going to see a lot of the Backstrom line. So there's just not a lot to like about this game. But if you're going to play the Canucks, I think you basically have to play that line. Overall, the power play doesn't look good either, right? Their power play is not great. The Capitals penalty kills right about league average, so it's just the third worst power play advantage on the slate. It's just a game that doesn't really do a whole lot for me. The fact that the Capitals have the third best power play advantage is pretty intriguing, especially if you're playing Oshie, Backstrom, Ovechkin, those guys, right? They're not going to get a whole lot done at 5v5, but the power play is starting to click again, which is good news for them. And in this spot, it looks pretty solid as well. So mostly Washington 2 or a or a power play stack if I'm playing the Capitals. The Canucks, I think if you're going to play them, you basically have to play that top line. It maybe one off Elias Pettersson, who's still too cheap at 4,600 and playing great. If you want to play this top line, and again, you want to try to get a little different, maybe you play Pettersson, Miller, Besser together, leave Pearson off. Really, at this point, Pearson being 4,200, Pettersson being 4,600, it seems like an easy choice to me. You also get the power play correlation. If you want to fully stack this line too, it's fine. But hopefully these three can stay hot, and that'd be kind of the route that I would go. But overall, this game's pretty boring. Not really a whole lot going on there. Defenseman, I mentioned Noah Dobson, probably my favorite defenseman on the slate. He's just a lot cheaper than like Rowensky, Carlson, Letang. Tons of upside. Pietrangelo is also very cheap at 5,800, but he hasn't really been doing a whole lot. Plus, a lot of the top power play correlation, 5v5 correlation goes to Shea Theodore, who's a couple $100 cheaper. So I'd probably play Theodore over Pietrangelo just for the salary savings. But overall, not a whole lot of interest in Shea Theodore either, because I really like, where is he? Nick Hag, wherever he is on this list. He's around here somewhere. I just can't see him. There he is, looking right at him. 3,200, tons of minutes, plays a lot with the top line as well. So 3,200, he just offers great salary relief. Without Brayden McNabb, he's seen a big uptick in minutes, and he's kind of a guy that can stuff the shots and block shots categories and be a really nice value play at 3,200. So he's among my favorite value options tonight. Logan Stanley's been a shot blocking machine as well at minimum price if you're looking for a minimum price guy. Adam Pelech, 3,600, solid. Nick Hag, I just mentioned him. Another guy mid-priced here, Josh Morrissey, wherever he is, 4,600. He's been really, really solid. I like Morrissey. You always know what you're getting out of Travis Hamonic. Where is the other guy? Alex Goligoski's playing a ton as well. 2,900 is a nice price for Alex Goligoski. Hag looks great. Yes, he sure does. Goligoski's probably like the next kind of lowest guy that I would really go to. There. So those are the defensemen. Again, I got to kind of run here, so I'm going to pick up the pace. Goaltenders, Tristan Jarry grades out as the number one option, followed closely by Kaapo Kähkönen, who is now confirmed. Kähkönen makes me a little nervous, as I mentioned. You've got the Minnesota Wild kind of struggling, but it's all up to Kähkönen, right? They're pretty good defensively. They just have to get better goaltending. So I do like Kähkönen a little bit. I feel a little bit better with Tristan Jarry. Just as you guys mentioned, the Golden Knights are super shorthanded. So they've really got one line that can do damage. And I think Jarry's got a pretty good opportunity here tonight. So second best, biggest favorite on the slate. So yeah, Jarry looks good at 8,200. Varlamov's interesting because the Jets, Varlamov's played pretty well this year. Just can't get any goal support. I don't think he'll see very much ownership either. So I actually kind of like Varlamov, but really Thatcher Demko is kind of the one guy I'm kind of got my eye on tonight. 7,500 is far too cheap for a goaltender of his talent level. He's probably the cheapest I'd go. Not a huge fan of Merzlikins. I think that's a brutal matchup. Probably not going to play Bressois. Hellebuck and Varlamov, I think, are a little bit too risky. I don't really know what that game's going to bring. So to me, it's kind of those top two guys, and then Thatcher Demko are the two that I really got my eye on. Vanacek's been solid. 8,000 was probably a little bit too rich against a Canucks team that's played pretty well. So I'd rather pay up a couple $100 for Jarry and Kähkönen than play Vanacek. And then if I'm dropping down, Demko is just so good at 7,500. In terms of the hat trick picks for tonight, I think somebody already said Kevin Fiala, but I would have loved Kevin Fiala. So I'm going to go, since nobody believes in the Golden Knights, I'll go Jack Eichel as my expensive hat trick tonight because, like I said, no one's buying in on Jack. Cheap Patrick, I don't know if it's cheap enough, but I'm going to go Nick Ehlers. It seems dicey, seems greasy, but okay, just kidding. I'll go Anthony Beauvillier. I can't be that dirty. Anthony Beauvillier is my cheap patty. Jack Eichel is my expensive patty. But that's going to do it for today's DFS report, excuse me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, apologies for not being able to do a show Tuesday, Thursday. Hopefully the NHL has a slightly better schedule ahead for us. If it were up to me, I would like to see 7, 8, 9 games every single night, as opposed to 2, 13, 2, 14. It's just ridiculous. So hopefully we get a little bit more of a consistent schedule. We can do 5 shows next week. But as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we will see you back here on Monday.